Hi, everybody. I'm PJ Kwong, and I am delighted to be hosting another town hall for Ringette Ontario, and I am going to be moderating this conversation. But first of all, I'm going to introduce our two guests. We have John Voss, who is Ringette Ontario's president, and then Pam Julian, Ringette Ontario's executive director. So, guys, are you guys ready for a great conversation tonight about some changes and about what we're doing in Ringette?
We are. Yes.
Can't wait. So, John, just bring me up to speed a little bit about what it is about being the president of Ringette Ontario. What is your role? What is your particular function within the organization?
Okay, PJ, Ringette Ontario is managed or directed by two groups. There's the board of directors, and I'm the chair or the president of the board of directors. And then there's the staff, and Pam is the executive director, and she oversees the staff. So the board's job is really to do with strategy and long-term policy and approving budgets. So our role is typically described as kind of giving policy guidance and strategic guidance and oversight to the staff. So we set the direction, we set the limits, and then Pam's staff is responsible for implementing programs and activities that achieve those objectives while operating within the guidelines that the board has set.
So it's a great collaboration. And Pam, when you and I had a chance to talk on the town hall last time, talking about sort of return to play and what that looked like, where do you see your function as executive director and your staff in terms of taking direction from the board?
I guess for myself, it would be that I'm looking to the board for guidance, for support, for confirming some of the ideas that we may have, and to help set the direction that we're going in. So as a staff, we've been working nonstop since March 13th and trying to come up with different processes and strategies. And the board has been right alongside us the whole way. So myself and the staff in the office really appreciate the collaborative efforts that we've put together and all the volunteers who've been working so hard on our working groups as well.
I noticed that online last week, Ringette Ontario announced that it was suspending league games and sanctioned tournaments until December 31st. I'm sure lots went into that decision. John, can you let us know sort of how that decision took place? We've been having some technical issues. So we're going to wait for John to come back. In the meantime, Pam, can you maybe fill us in until John can jump back in?
Sure. We've been contemplating different scenarios and at the same time keeping our eyes on what's happening in the world and in Ontario. Lots of conversations between other sports and ice sports and trying to get a handle on next steps for us. And at the same time, being cognizant and considerate to our associations, especially those associations who will be hosting events, and trying to look at mitigating the risk for them. Because at this point, for them to book ice for tournaments that we're not really sure are going to happen, that's a lot of risk for them to assume. And based on where we currently stand in Ontario right now, and the fact that some of us are still in phase 1 and phase 2 is just opening up in other areas, we had to be very aware of what was happening in moving forward this season. So it was a very difficult decision. It took a lot of thought, a lot of consultation, but we came to the decision to suspend just the tournaments and the circuit leagues, not programming.
You know, that's very interesting. So as is the case with all sports, we're looking at it's not just one thing. And of course, you've got the board and you've got the staff trying to do both things. So John, I'm going to start with you. If the microphone gremlins are on our side, and I've got my fingers crossed, what is the message to the Ringette community at this point?
Yeah, I apologize for that. I'm going to keep my hands in view so you know that I'm not muting myself. The computer, for some reason, spontaneously puts me on mute. The first thing we want to do is, first of all, acknowledge the frustration that people felt and the disappointment they felt with the way the season ended, that we weren't able to complete our leagues or our tournaments or, regional championships or provincial championships or nationals. We weren't able to have our banquets and our year-end parties. And of course, we weren't able to have tryouts in the spring and that kind of thing. So there's a disappointment with that. And there's obviously an eagerness to get back on the ice as soon as we can this fall. The purpose, we really want to clarify a bit the message that we sent out last week, and in part what we were trying to say, as well as provide some background on why we were trying to say it. The first thing is, we're not saying there will be no Ringette this fall. Some have interpreted our message.
Pam, I think you got to jump in again. I'm so sorry, John. But we're talking about the message, so it's not about not having Ringette in the fall.
No, and I think that the misinterpretation and around that, and the clarity is that we're not saying no Ringette. So we're basically saying any programming that you are allowed to do within your municipality that falls within the parameters of the public health guidelines in that area. And we're cognizant of the fact that this is going to be different across the province. So we're taking a regional approach to that message, and we are supporting our associations to be able to do what they can in those areas. Again, at the end of the day, it's not up to Ringette Ontario or even Ringette Canada to determine what those numbers will look like. It is the facility. So the facility will be the one that'll say, you can have 10 people, you can have 6 people, you can have 20 people. It's not going to be us. So we will be building those progressions, but we really wanted to clarify that because there was a lot of feedback and remarks that came in regarding the fact that they thought we were canceling programming, but we're not. We are wanting to work with our associations to be able to offer any kind of programming that we possibly can, as long as we're within those guidelines of the local public health authorities.
You know, it's such an interesting time that we're living through. I mean, there is so much information that's out there, and it has changed sort of as time has gone on. People have been looking to try and figure out what the next steps are. And I want to know, why is it that you're sort of going on or leaning on the side of thinking that it won't be business as usual? So that aspect obviously came into the decision.
Yeah. That was based on a lot of research, a lot of conversations, a lot of consultation with the ministry, but also with the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association, otherwise known as ORFA, of which 7,000 of our facilities are members of, and across the province. And they definitely are saying it's not going to be business as usual. And then even in terms of looking at what's happening right now with the phases that are occurring, and recognizing that it is progressions. We can see just even here in Ontario, we're moving from 5 to now 10. And when they open up those public facilities, I don't foresee, again, this is just based on research and conversations and consultation, that they're going to open it up and say, yeah, you can have 250 people walk through a public facility in September. So I don't see that as happening. I think it's going to be a very slow and gradual approach, because we have to be very aware of the health and safety of our members, just like the facility is going to be responsible for the health and safety of their tenants.
You know, it's very interesting. We're just going to wait for John to come back and just take a look. John, how are you? Your computer hates you. I'm not sure why.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. So I want to back up a little bit and just talk about the fact Pam was just referring, and I'd love to hear your take on it as well. Why did the association decide to err on the side of caution? Why is it that you're feeling that perhaps things won't be business as usual within our province? Right.
Okay, so there's really two things going on, two areas of concern that are outside of our control. There's the health environment is a key thing. So what's going on? What do we see happening in the world in terms of how the pandemic is progressing and what it means for us? So one thing we see right now is, as the province is opening up things this summer, it's opening up in a patchwork way. Some areas can open sooner than others. Right now, Ontario, or like the Toronto area, the GTA, is behind other regions in opening up certain things. And we've seen this elsewhere too. For example, in Quebec, when they opened the schools, the city of Montreal was behind the rest of the province in opening the schools. So we expect that when we get to the point where sports and programs like that can open, it will again be a patchwork across the province. What we've seen in other places as well is that there can be hotspots or outbreaks that happen that force things to close down again. There was a case in New Brunswick where the region around Campbellton had to shut down because there was things were going smoothly, and then all of a sudden they weren't in that community, and it had to shut down. So when we look at what this means for the Ringette environment, we see that the conditions that exist in different parts of the province could open up and close down again at different parts of the province at different points in time. There's also a lot of concern about what happens when the fall comes and the cold weather comes and we go back into indoors more than outdoors. The kids are back in school, and this talk of a second wave. So there's the possibility that things generally will close down again in the fall. So those things are all outside of our control. When the government decides and the public health officials decide that it's safe to open things up or that things have to close down is outside of our control. So that's part of the environment. And then there's a lot of uncertainty around the facilities themselves. And Pam's been part of a group that's been looking at that kind of stuff in coordination with the recreational facilities managers and others, ice sports. And I think maybe Pam can comment a little bit on what we're seeing and what we're hearing about how rinks will open, how we'll get access to rinks, and what some of the considerations are around that for the fall.
You know, I've been sort of listening intently, and I've been looking at the messaging that you guys have put out with Ringette Ontario, and I love the fact that you are so connected to your membership. I want to know, have you already decided on some adaptations in terms of your planning and in terms of your programs as we're moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, we are already working. I mean, so across the country, just in terms of Ringette, all the PSOs are working with Ringette Canada in working on a pan-Canadian return to activity, return to play plan. And then each province will be creating their own. And then we have our technical directors across the country who will be starting to work on some of those differences in programming that we're going to need to create for those progressions. So it could be anything from rule modifications to online resources and development opportunities. We're trying to think outside the box in terms of what we can do and what we can create based on the availability of the ice, as well as the numbers that we are allowed to have on the ice. So we are working on those, and we will have those resources for associations as soon as we get them finalized, which we're hoping will be within the next month or so.
Do either of you have just sort of a general comment or anything that you'd like to sort of talk about before we move on to some great member questions? Oh my goodness, this is the best part. You've got some wonderful members who are already commenting in our live chat, as well as questions that got sent in ahead of time. But is there anything that you'd like to comment on before we go to that?
Yeah, PJ, I'd like to maybe just pull a couple of those points together to really answer the question you asked earlier about why did we take this step. So great. What we're really seeing is the public health uncertainty. You know, what rules, what policies will the governments permit? When will things be allowed to open? That's outside of our control. That's their control. What Pam is hearing about access to arenas is, again, some arenas will open sooner than others. Each arena, you know, each municipality is going to have its own rules about how people have to sign in, what the sanitation rules are, whether you have to have sort of a buffer time between when people can come into the rink and when people can leave the rink and all this sort of stuff. There's going to be penalties associated, fines if you don't comply with those rules, or we may lose our access to the ice if we don't properly comply with whatever rules they put in place. So all to say that business as usual is going to be challenging. The environment is uncertain, and if people are spending time preparing, for example, for a big tournament in the fall, the volunteer time and the resources and the money is focused on preparing for an event that has a high likelihood of being canceled. We think we need to focus our time on preparing for programming that we have a greater likelihood of being able to actually deliver under the circumstances that we're likely to see when we get to the fall. So if we spend our time preparing for programs like that, where maybe the numbers are restricted and the number of times we get on the ice is limited, we want to be ready to implement that kind of program, which means we have to put aside planning for tournaments and we have to focus instead on planning these alternative types of programs. And just to kind of underline that, obviously been paying attention closely to how things are opening up over the summer. And we see a case where earlier this week, I think the government allowed daycares to open soon. And many daycares, I think it was Thursday or Friday, they're allowed to open in some areas. And many of them respond, whoa, that's too soon. We can't possibly be ready. And I understand that because there's a lot of things to get ready. I think there's like an 8-page guide they have to follow on protocols and things. They have to train staff to do that and everything. We don't want to be in a situation where, it's the week before Thanksgiving and the government says, okay, arenas can open. And we have to say, whoa, we're not ready. We can't, we don't have a format for putting 3 or 4 player games on the ice. So we have to spend the time now to focus to be ready with those programs so that when the window opens, we're ready with a program that will fit within the constraints that we're facing at that time. And we don't know what those are going to be. So we got to prepare a number of alternatives. And that's what Pam's working on now.
It's great to see the amount of, first of all, collaboration, but secondly, the amount of thought and care that's going into this. None of this stuff just happens. There are lots of things that are being taken into account. So let's go to some member questions that were sent to us before we started this session tonight. First one is about programming and about whether or not associations will be able to host summer programs like their camps and gym ringette. Where are we at on this?
Well, we've pushed forward our opening date to September 1st. So I would say that will be a no. And that is just based on what we're seeing right now. There is no public facilities, i.e. community centers that we know of that are open right now. I know there's some private ones, but there is, we just don't feel that the health and safety of our children is worth putting a large group of children together in August.
Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. And also along the same lines of programming, there's a terrific question from Tom Anderson, who's from Pickering. He wants to know if you're no longer hosting a tournament in the first half, can Ringette Ontario consider allowing these groups to try and move their tournament to the second half if ice will be made available? I mean, are there considerations about moving things around?
Sure. Hi, Tom. Thanks for the question. We right now, nothing is a no. We are telling associations who normally hold or held a fall tournament to still put in a sanctioned event application for the spring, because at this point, we don't know what's going to happen in the spring. And if there is some leeway, we may be able to do that. I can't say yes or no, but I am not going to say do not put an application in.
That's great. Let's talk for a moment about the fee structure. Are you guys, have you figured out sort of what the fee structure is going to look like this year?
Yeah, we released our fees, I think the structure yesterday. We are not raising fees this year because of COVID and because we felt that it was just not appropriate. We are also, the only thing that we have to raise is insurance by a little bit because we've been told that it will increase and it's a hard cost. So it's an in and out. It's not something that we hold. But, it will be, we will expect registrations of our members because it'll reflect whatever programming we're going to have. But what that programming is right now, we can't say. But in order to access online programming or resources or any of the programming that your association would have, you would have to register.
Can I add a point to that?
You bet.
Yeah, I think, we're sensitive to the fact that money can be tight for many people under the current circumstances. And there's uncertainty about what the program will look like. And people don't want to plunk down hundreds of dollars and not know what they're going to get for it. So I think we are sensitive to the fact that if it gets to be, say, October and the window's open and we can see, okay, with a high confidence, we can offer 8 weeks of ringette. You're on the ice twice a week for an hour and a half each time. It's going to cost you X. That's something where people might then be more confident in registering for that and going ahead with that program. We can then rethink what the period after Christmas might look like, depending on changes in the environment and what kind of a program we can offer for that period of time. So we're trying to be flexible around registration and other things so that people can manage that uncertainty and manage that financial risk.
So about return to play. Is Ringette Ontario working on sort of a return to play activity plan for associations to use?
We are.
Okay.
Yeah, so as I stated earlier, we are working with Ringette Canada and the other PSOs to create some really great pan-Canadian document right now that we should have hopefully out within the next week or so. I know that we've been frantically working on it for the last 2 weeks, and it's been an amazing team effort across the country. And that will be the basis for how each province will then expand out and to get more into, I guess, the weeds of in the province and what's allowed in the province. So we are working on our RTP, I'd say like return to activity first and then return to play. We are working on those plans as well as lots of resources for the associations. So there will be almost, as I guess you could call it, like a COVID package for associations on what to do when and some great resources for how to handle the upcoming season.
This is a very interesting question. It came up before from a member who sent it in, but it's coming up quite a bit in the live comments as well. And that is, will associations be allowed to run tryouts, team formations and practices, and get out your crystal ball? If so, when would that be?
Yeah, I wish I had a magic 8-ball that worked.
Me too.
Yeah, you know, we are saying that if you are allowed to run these events within your public, like your local municipality public health authority guidelines, then you are allowed to go ahead. As we stated earlier on in the call, we talked about how we're not canceling programming. However, programming has to adhere to what those local those local public authority guidelines are. So it's not us that will ascertain whether you can put 30 people on the ice. It's going to be your facility. So at the end of the day, all of these programming will be all forms of programming, whether it be tryouts, your team formations, your practices, your skills and drills. They're going to be determined. What you're going to run is going to be determined by your facility because they'll be the ones determining the numbers. And then what we can do on our side in Ringette is then create those progressive plans, as we've been talking about, which builds on what you're allowed to do.
You know, we've got a couple of really great questions, a little bit more complicated than I would know how to answer, that's for sure. But if the province is taking a regional approach to return to normal or a new normal, people are wondering if Ringette should do the same thing. And specifically, if there are Ringette associations that are located within areas that don't seem to have a lot of COVID activity, would there be a possibility of exhibition games in that case? So where do you guys sit on that?
John, do you want to start this one?
Sure, I'll give you a rest. So it ties back a little bit to what Pam said. The ability to do that is not completely controlled by Ringette Ontario, because obviously if you can only have 10 or 12 people in the rink at a time, it's pretty hard to run a tryout. It's pretty hard to run games, etc. The other consideration is that even if in your local association you can form a team, let's say you form an A team, you want to then play an A team, but maybe there's no other A teams around, so you've created a group that can't really play. So what we're trying to promote is the idea of a more flexible program that where you can pool players within your association or in nearby associations that are of comparable skill and form teams, and whether that's a 4-a-side game or a 3-a-side game or a 6-a-side game as numbers permit within your municipality, your region, then there's a program for doing that. If part of our thinking is that if things turn out to be better than we expect, you know, if the problem gets solved and it's possible for us to scale up and be more business as usual, it's much easier for us to pivot from this smaller scale program back to the normal program than it would be to go the other way. So if we go into the season assuming everything is going to be normal, usual, and find it isn't, now we're scrambling to try and patch together something that we can do instead, plan B. We'd rather have plan B ready right from the start and then be able to scale up in each region to the extent that you're able to do that based on the restrictions that your municipality and your health authority is imposing on play in your region.
That's excellent. Anything to add to that, Pam?
No, actually, it's pretty much it. I mean, I think we need to reaffirm the fact is that all sports are in the same boat. So it doesn't matter what sport you are, you're going to have to adhere to your local public health authorities. So even hockey is going to have to adhere to that, and it doesn't matter what sport. And I know in speaking with the other sports that I'm in conversations with on almost I want to say almost like a daily basis. We all are struggling to figure out what to do next and when. And the only thing we can control is what programming we can create within those public health guidelines in each area.
Let's talk a little bit about competitive level.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Before you, I just wanted to tack on to the end of that, because I think people are concerned a bit about, are we out of step with what others are doing? And obviously hockey is the obvious one, but other sports too. So obviously we're paying very close attention to that. We noticed today that Tom Rennie of Hockey Canada was interviewed in Ottawa on the radio and said, you know, hockey this fall is probably not going to be the way you would think of hockey. You know, it's probably not going to be games and tournaments, but we're working hard to make sure you have a chance to get on the ice and develop your skills and have fun. And that's exactly the same mindset that we're trying to communicate Ringette Ontario is taking, right? We cannot promise Ringette as you're used to it, but we're doing our best to give you Ringette in whatever form we can. Our goal is to get you on the ice as soon as possible with whatever format we can fit within the constraints.
Yeah.
Terrific.
A couple other things we've seen is like the Ontario University Athletics has canceled their fall seasons and championships and stuff. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you can kind of imagine, yeah, football, that's not going to work when you got numbers constrained. But obviously they're canceling lacrosse, they're canceling field hockey, which are sports that are very analogous to Ringette in terms of the scale in which they're played and the nature of the play. And in fact, they're played outdoors, which is even a lower risk, but they're canceling those. So this is happening. You know, we're maybe being a little more blunt about it than some sports are, but the purpose of that is to focus everybody's attention on getting ready for what we think we can do, so that we can plan and be prepared when the opportunity presents itself.
Before we go to start to talk about the competitive aspect, we've got a great question coming in from Dee. Let's just take a look. How much support will regions get from Ringette Ontario?
Great question, Dee. Thank you. We're working very closely with our regional directors right now. And in fact, they're members of one of our main working groups who've been working on this since March. So whatever resources we're creating, we're doing them with them in conjunction with them. And they're bringing back to us some of the things that they're hearing from their associations, which is amazing. So there will be lots of support. We are here for our members. We are here for our regions. 100%. Doesn't matter the level of play. We just want blades on the ice.
We all want blades on the ice, that's for sure. All of us who work in any winter sport. So let's talk a little bit about competitive. What's that going to look like this year? And are teams going to be able to travel this season?
Yeah, that's that magic 8-ball question, right? Yeah. So as John talked about earlier, it's going to be very difficult to form teams if you can't travel to play other teams. And we're not even sure what kind of travel restrictions are going to be within regions and within the province itself. I know that to travel outside the province is probably not going to happen right away. And again, that's going to be coming down from the ministry, from the feds, and from our Ontario, like from the provincial ministry. So with travel, we can't say, just we have to follow their rules. And then with the competitive level, as soon as we can get people moving, we want to. So again, we can't predict what's going to happen, but we're hoping that we'll be able to get teams moving. And at the end of the day, getting athletes out there and skating and keeping themselves physically active and in shape, I think it's really, really important. So we don't get any injuries coming back, right?
Yes, exactly.
As an example around that, you know, one of our board members, Christian Vardy, is an NRL player. The restrictions that the concerns that we're seeing and the restrictions that may exist in the fall could make it very difficult, impossible for NRL to compete, because that depends on travel and interprovincial travel, which may not be possible. Those athletes are looking for a place to play. So I want to sort of present a glass half full and not a glass half empty. That it may be that a competitive level player can't form the usual U16 AA or U19 AA team that they're used to, or U16A team that they're used to. But as an alternative, they may have an opportunity for a more informal session on the ice with an NRL player like Christian and other NRL players from the region whose NRL program isn't operating, but they want to get on the ice too. So, the ability to pool together a bunch of players of similar caliber relax, be flexible on rules like release and tryout and stuff. And like, let's just get a bunch of players together who can go play and have a meaningful game. And if you've played for 2 or 3 weeks and the score is lopsided, you switch some players around and even out the teams and keep going, right? So there's lots of ways to get Ringette in, sort of jump through that window of opportunity and get fun Ringette with your friends happening fast within the limits of whatever number constraints we face, and still get skates on the ice. And that's our primary goal. So it may not be in the format that you're used to, but the goal is skates on the ice.
And the format that we're used to, whatever this new normal is going to be, it's, in terms of the longevity of the sport, it's going to be just a moment in time. We will get back to the way that we all have been able to enjoy Ringette at some point, whether it's in the next year, 2 years, we don't know exactly, but it will be again with full stands and full complements of people in the ice enjoying themselves. So another couple of groups that are very important, and that is the coaches and the referees. Can we talk a little bit about the clinics and if they're going to take place this season?
Great question. We are moving everything online. So there will be coaching clinics. There will be officiating clinics. In fact, we're working on getting the pod program online. We strongly encourage coaches to go out and get whatever pre-modules that you do need to take prior to this, but the clinics will be moved online, and we will be supporting as well as providing resources and webinars and for coaches and referees.
Okay, so that online model is something that a lot of sports are doing. John, you were going to add something to that?
No, I'm fine with that one.
Good, then I'm going to move on. It's my turn. I want to talk about the kids. I want to talk about children's Ringette. First of all, how do you define children in terms of the sport? And how are we going to sort of address their needs?
So children's Ringette, we were ready to launch when COVID hit. We will be providing all those materials. Will go out in, I believe, July. Definitely, this is actually a good time to try or begin children's Ringette because of that half ice kind of scenario and the number of kids you can get on the ice. So for us, we define children as we have 2 levels. We have U6 Fun 1 and U8 Fun 2. So it's anybody under the age of U10. So that's where we're starting with. So that programming will start and it will become mandatory in 21-22. So this is actually a good time to try it and start getting some of those kids on the ice because we will be constrained by different requirements within the facilities.
It sounds like a whole lot of fun. That's what I want to. That's what I want to say. But I want to ask you guys a little bit about the provincial championships. Are they going to take place?
Well, we can't predict that yet. So fingers crossed. We're hoping. They are in March. So we've got some time to make that decision. We'll be reassessing whether that occurs in the fall.
This is an excellent question, and that is, will the associations and teams be required to reduce the number of participants in House League? And is that a decision that will be made by Ringette Ontario or Ringette Canada?
So we will not be making that decision. As I've said, as we keep saying throughout this, is that at the end of the day, the sport doesn't have the control here. It's the facility and the local public health authorities that will have the control. So if we do need to reduce the numbers because your facility is saying you're only allowed to have 12 people in the facility, we are currently working on programming for what that would look like. As John has said, it's much easier to build those progressions than it is to start and then pull back. So we are working on all these different scenarios that we've been trying to figure out what might be, trying to use our magic 8 balls as best we can.
You know, it's all about the 8 ball. Let's face facts. So could either one of you or both of you please comment on the thing that has been the biggest surprise about navigating these COVID waters with your sport and within your role?
The biggest surprise.
Well, I think
lack of sleep.
Yeah, I think hats off to Pam and her staff because the flexibility that this has demanded, sort of an abrupt end to last season, and trying to really wind down or undo arrangements for the various provincial events that were suspended or canceled at the last minute. Try to get recover financially from those, and there will be a hit to Ringette Ontario from some of those costs that were not recoverable. But dealing with that, and then being able to pivot to in the May board meeting is when Pam brings us her operating plans for the coming season, and you can imagine how complex that requirement is at this stage, trying to plan for the coming year. So it's really required everyone to broaden their minds about what's possible, how we can be flexible, and part of the obligation of the board of directors is to act in the best interest of Ringette Ontario. So certainly we're very mindful of the safety of members, whether it's their health and safety from the risks of COVID-19, or whether it's safe sport and maintaining those policies in whatever programming we come forward with. But reducing the risk to the organization, the risk of losing money if we've planned a big event and it gets canceled on short notice, is part of our obligation too. So that's part of what's gone into this thinking about managing risk. So anyway, short answer to your question, I think, is the flexibility that it's called for, and Pam and her staff have really answered the call on that.
It has not been easy.
No, and I think, I made a joke about lack of sleep. I have to say total kudos to Marion and Carla. Ringette Ontario is a 3-person outfit. So the three of us work very well together as a team. And I have to say they have been absolutely fabulous in terms of jumping in and with both beat. And we've been working crazy hours and weekends, evenings, whatever it takes, because the main thing for us is we really understand that this is a constantly changing situation. And I think if someone had told me back on March 15th that I'd still be sitting in my house and only going out to the grocery store every 2 weeks with a mask, I wouldn't have believed them. So I think that, huge kudos to all our volunteers who continue to work tirelessly on our committees and for putting in the time, even though we're now, past the traditional Ringette season. I'm totally appreciative of everybody's efforts.
And it has been a group effort for sure. There's a great question that's come in from Tracy Waxman, which is about the season itself. And could it be extended past the normal end of season date if you have to do some more sort of like readjusting and shuffling on the fly?
Great question, Tracy. Thank you so much. Nothing's off the table. So we definitely are contemplating it within one of our working groups. But again, we can't predict. And we also have to be cognizant of other sports as well as availability of ice and facilities. So, obviously lacrosse and field hockey and a number of other ones who would traditionally use some of those facilities can't and haven't been able to. So we may not have a choice in some areas, but then there may be other ones that we can do things. So we're definitely keeping our options open because if there's an opportunity, we really want to grab it.
It's all about grabbing the opportunities. And it's interesting because we have a group of Ringette players about which we have not spoken yet. And that is the adults.
Yes.
Let's talk about the adults. They're very important in every
important. Yeah, they are part of the legacy, right?
Yep.
The same rules are going to apply to adults. There is no difference. Health and safety is obviously paramount for everybody. So it'll be the same thing. And again, they'll be constrained by whatever the health and safety protocols are in their area with their facilities.
John, what do you think about sort of the Ringette family as a whole and this whole idea of trying to navigate these return to play waters? What do you see as the board?
Well, I think, when we were doing our strategic planning exercise a year or two ago, we talked a lot about sort of what the values of the organization are, and some things that came to mind were things like building character, embracing challenge, being resilient, and the community of Ringette, the strength of the community is something that people always point to as what draws them to our sport. And so when you're in a situation like this, where there's a bit of a crisis or an emergency or a turmoil that you need to address, we're really calling on some of those strengths of our community to try and address these. So the resiliency that participants in Ringette learn, the ability to sort of bounce back from a disappointment or a challenge is really what comes to the fore, right? We're facing a situation here that's not of our making. We can't control it. We can't make it end. We just have to be able to sort of bounce back and make the most of the situation and be ready to move forward, the same as you would after you lost a tough game or whatever. One of the things that is going to require is that we're flexible and that we work together to solve situations. So if we're trying something new and it doesn't work, we're going to get feedback from people and adapt it. We're going to have to be flexible to get programming on the ice that fits within the constraints in each association or within each municipality. That's going to take teamwork. It's going to take communication and collaboration, and that's part of what our community is strong for. So those are things that we think are opportunities for us, strengths that we can draw on that are going to help us be able to get through this successfully.
It's so much fun to sort of be involved with other sports and seeing sort of how they figure things out. It's been a time of extraordinary challenge, as we've mentioned, but there are all these different groups within Ringette who require your attention, your thought, your care. Let's talk about House League. House League, of course, is the cornerstone probably for lots of Ringette players. That's where they really live. So do we know anything about how House League is going to unfold this season?
So so it's twofold actually, because we have House League and then we have our Circuit League. So the Circuit Leagues are ones where we kind of put like a stoppage on because of the travel. But the House Leagues, if it's internal, and again, if it's within your public health guidelines that you're allowed to have those numbers on the ice, then we're saying go for it, because it's a way to get the players out there and playing and having fun, and of course keeping themselves active and being with their friends. So we are not saying no to it. It's just, again, we don't have control over the numbers, so it's whatever you're allowed to do.
What about you, John? Tell me about when you think about the Ringette players, what do you think is so important about the sport? Why are people so passionate about it? Why are they involved? What is it about this sport?
Well, I think one of the things that we always keep in mind when we're doing our planning and decision making, we hear over and over how Ringette is the release for people. It's the stress reliever. It's getting back with their friends. It's leaving the challenges of school or work behind and just sort of getting on the ice and being in the moment and that kind of thing. And in these times, people need that more than ever. They need to get out of the house. They need to get exercise. They need to be able to de-stress and put that aside. Parents need their kids to be able to do that, and parents, adults themselves need to be able to do that. We get that, and I think a key message that we're trying to communicate tonight is that we do get that, and we're trying our hardest to find a way to be able to offer programs as soon as we can, as soon as it's safe to return to the ice, as soon as that decision is made by the authorities whose authority it is to make that decision. We be ready so that we can get you on the ice as soon as possible, and you can get that shot of Ringette that you need, that escape, that release. So we know that, we understand that, and that's what we're trying to do.
There is so much effort that's going on in all parts of the sport. It's just so wonderful to see. I'm going to ask you each for a final thought. Pam, I'm going to start with you. Is there anything that you'd like our audience to know?
Well, first of all, thank you for the amazing amount of questions and thoughts, and the positive support that we have received has been wonderful. I guess I want you all to know that we are not making these decisions lightly, nor are we making them in silos. We're working not just with our other Ringette PSOs and in Ringette Canada, but we're also talking on a daily basis with a lot of other sports. And I have to say, it has been absolutely amazing to work with all these sports and not only learn about their sports, but we're sharing resources, which is phenomenal. And I mean, and PJ, you yourself, you come from skate. So, in working with skate's been a great resource for us. And a lot of other sports, I mean, man, it's just amazing. So I can't speak enough to how much of that collaborative team effort is showing up in the sport community around Ontario. It's fabulous to see. And you know, and with all the amazing questions everybody's been saying, just please know if we didn't get to your question, we are tracking them all. We're working on an FAQ that we're going to be then releasing early next week, which will address some of basically as many questions as we possibly can. And there'll be an organic document that will continually update as we go along. So please know that everything we're doing, we know it's constantly changing. We will be updating resources and information as we get it.
And as people can see on the screen, there is some information. We want to make sure that you get to ringetteontario.com, follow Ringette Ontario on social media. And if you have any questions, comments, feedback, info@ringetteontario.com is where you can email in some of those questions and comments. John, best for last.
I'll try. Yeah, so you know, our main goal is to assure you that we know that Ringette is important to you, and our goal is to get people back on the ice as soon as we can. Safety is paramount. We can't compromise on that. So whether it's your health in the face of this health emergency, or whether it's safe sport, we won't compromise on those things. But we have to be willing to try new things. We have to be flexible, adapt the program for the sake of increasing the likelihood, the opportunity to get on the ice as soon as possible. So we ask people to be willing to try new things, to be open-minded, and just, you know, even if it's an informal program, let's get on the ice and play. We want to be trying to nurture the Ringette community. So there may be communities who can't get on the ice in the fall, but Pam and her crew will be developing other programming that allows people in the Ringette community to connect with one another, and get you know, participate in Ringette programming, even if that means their skates can't get on the ice. We ask people to stay positive. You know, as athletes, we learn to stay positive and keep our head in the game and focus on moving forward. This is a challenging time, but we ask you to try and do that. And of course, to be a team player. To make this work is going to take collaboration and flexibility and working together, whether that's local associations working with Ringette Ontario, whether that's volunteers working within the association, or whether that's the players on the ice. I think by working together, we can make it work, and we can get back on the ice as soon as possible.
You know, this has been such a wonderful session, so informative, and such great engagement on the part of all of those Ringette fans and players and coaches and referees who are out there. So I just want to say, everybody, I'm PJ Kwong. I'm delighted to have been part of this Facebook Live session. I've just been given the thumbs up that we're going to do other Facebook Live sessions as we move forward, and I would be thrilled to be part of it. So for me, for Ringette Ontario President John Voss, and for Ringette Ontario Executive Director Pam Julian, we're going to say goodnight here, and thank you so much for joining us. See you next time.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks,
thank you, PJ.
Good night.
Thank you.
PJ.